I'm going to start with a slide. So this is the producer as the world sees me. You know, calm, confident, a picture of poise, well-dressed, smiling. And this is what I do on set, on location in Rajasthan, in the summer when it's 35 or 45 degrees heat, with the sun blazing down on the dunes and the heat reflecting off of the dunes. The shades that I'm wearing are to protect me from that intense heat, and that colored cloth you see is periodically dumped in cold water and given so that we can, you know, cover ourselves and protect ourselves from the heat. So this is what I have to do to be what you saw in slide number 1. And our production company, which I own with director Nagesh Kukunur, is called SIC Productions or SIC Productions. SIC stands for Stability is a Curse. You know, when we are brought up, while we are told that we need to do everything to achieve stability in life, in our relationships, in our, the careers that we choose, in our jobs, in the money stream that comes, we realized that that was the one thing that was holding us back from finally taking the plunge to be filmmakers. Full-time filmmakers, that is. Because he was an engineer who had a good job, a stable income. I had a business, and we had become slaves to the paycheck that came at the end of the year or end of the month. And you can imagine the hesitation, because as filmmakers, we'd have an erratic income at best. And then, that was the hesitation to become full-time filmmakers. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. Any good story, in my opinion, is understandable, comprehensive when it's told in a linear fashion. So let me start right from the beginning. I grew up in Hyderabad in a loving middle-class family, and I did not know until very much later, as to how privileged I was to have the kind of parents I had. I have a younger brother, and my parents brought both of us up with the same yardstick, with the same rules. So if we both went to horse riding classes, among other things, we both went to karate classes, and we both went to Kathak classes. So it was not like, there was this gender differentiality between the two of us. We both had the exact same deadline to come home at night after parties. At a very impressionable age, I must have been 11 or 12, I think, I read this book by Sidney Sheldon called Rage of Angels, which had this fantastic woman called Jennifer Parker, who was this amazing lawyer. And she, for some reason, from then on, became my role model. That's all I wanted to be, the best lawyer in the world. And despite studying law from one of the premier institutions in India, the only thing I did not become was a lawyer. I came back from Bombay with a great law degree under my belt, but with the plans of opening a multi-designer store, the first of its kind in Hyderabad. 6 years into starting Elahé, that's what I call the store, and running this business successfully, Nagesh met me through a common friend and asked me to audition for a role. And I auditioned and I got the role. And with that, I entered this fantastic, magical, chaotic world of filmmaking, of rehearsals and lights and camera and lots of action. And then a week before we were going to start filming, Nagesh offered me to be his assistant director. His only assistant director, mind you. He had written the film, he was producing, directing, and acting as the lead actor in this film, and he had no assistant director. And even though I had never been on a film set before, I jumped at the opportunity and I said, yeah, because, like we always say, Hyderabadiyon ko jharayo na karo, confidence ki kami nahi rehti. So I, of course, became his assistant director. And the film I'm talking about that we made was Hyderabad Blues. And the rest, as they say, is history. Today, we stand with about 14 feature films under our belt. We have 4 running shows on the OTT platform, and we are nowhere near done with our filmography. Well, the radical shift from being a business owner into the world of production or being a producer was, not always smooth and easy. Because see, even while I was running Elahé, it was okay for a woman to do fashion, right? I mean, women do fashion, women dress other women up, so there was no problem in that. But then to take on the big bad world of filmmaking or coming into this big world, people were a little confused. I mean, there was this little girl from a little town with one film under her belt who was now asking for more money to make a film. it really didn't quite gel with them. And you must understand that the upbringing that I had, where I came from, I grew up under the misconception that gender had a role to play in what I could do, or more importantly, not do. So therefore, these kind of things were a little confusing to me. When people said that, oh, aap karenge, oh, will you be able to do it? I couldn't understand what that hesitation was. There were so many times that I would make an appointment with an investor on the phone. Those were the days of landline, of course, only landlines. And I would enter the meeting at the appointed time, and I could see the look on the face of the person across the desk, looking at me and saying, where's your mother? Because they didn't really expect this person to walk into the room to take this meeting. But that was not all. Because Hyderabad Blues was made on a shoestring budget, they couldn't understand why I wanted more money to make the next film. And foolishly, I wore the fact that all the money we put on screen. So now if you give me more money, I'll make an even better film, as a badge of honor. Quickly realizing that people like to give money to the people who already have money. Yes, that's a conundrum I wrapped my head around easily and very quickly. So there were times when I would suddenly get a meeting next day in Bombay, and I live in Hyderabad, of course, at like 10 in the morning. So I would take an overnight bus to Bombay, but before entering the meeting, I would tie a airline tag on my handbag. So they thought I'd taken the early morning flight to come to Bombay and stuff like that. So, I had the money and you just need to give me a little more kind of thing. Even on set, people would naturally assume that Nagesh had all the answers because he was a man. And they would go to him with all their queries. But, kudos to him, he sent them right back if there were any production-related queries. And I don't know how many of you have been on a set or behind a filmmaking or you've organized this festival. However prepared you are, however rehearsed you are, a film set is chaotic at best. And every single day they throw variables at you which you would not even dreamt of. So I can come up with 100 examples, but I'm sure all of you watched, or most of you watched this film called Iqbal. So let me stick to Iqbal. There was this shot that we were going to take where the actors would board a train. Nasiruddin Shah and Shreyas Talpade would board a train, and the crane was off the platform on a field. And as the train came past us, the camera would crane up, catch the expressions of the actors in the train, and then crane up to expose the field at the back, and the train was going underneath it. All that fine, rehearsal ho gaya, everyone's okay, and the next day we come to shoot. The actors board the train leaves the station. The crane operator, a manually operated crane, he realized that this train who had come today was a little wider than the last train that we had rehearsed with, which means if he allowed the design shot to happen, the train would knock off the cameraman and the camera and almost kill him. So he kind of adjusted the train width, the train back a little bit, and we never got our shot. The shot we got was this. Those are the actors whose face you can't see. And the crane had to move up to expose just the train going underneath it, And the cameraman, I remember, had shut the eyepiece and looked down in irritation at the crane operator. But the point is, he actually saved his life. And the audience was none the wiser. They just saw this beautiful shot of the crane going up and the train going underneath and the fields being exposed at the back. So there are a million kind of stories that, happen on a film set that I could tell you, but that for another day. But this is to tell you that how I love doing what I do, and I hope I don't have to do anything else. But having said that, that's not the only thing I can do, or the only thing that I want to be doing. Years ago I had dreamt of opening this club called the C Club. C meaning cinema, cartoons, chai, coffee, carom, comics. And I would open this in a nice bungalow somewhere, and people could just hang out. And spend time and talk of changing the world like we did when we were kids. We had our college canteens, we had the Alliance, we had the parks. They were non-judgmental, non-pressure, kind of spaces that we really got together and exchanged ideas. And today we've taken those spaces away from our children. Our children today go to, commercialized places, drink coffee and eat muffins and listen to Bollywood songs. So that is, literally our onus to give back spaces to people where they can just be themselves. And this very good friend of mine inherited this space, this bungalow in Banjara Hills, And then he told me that, why don't we give concrete shape to your flighty ideas? And that's how we started Lamakaan. 4 of us like-minded friends got together. We are the board of directors and the founder members, and we started Lamakaan. Lamakaan is actually a Persian word. It's not a fancy word for la maison or something. That's why we call it Lamakaan. Lamakaan actually in Persian means without boundaries. La is no, and makan is your dwelling. So it's without boundaries. And that's what we started, that this place is completely democratic. It's an open cultural space. It opens its doors from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. and you can just be there, hang out, take on the world's problems and try to solve them. And there's no pressure to order something from a canteen. The cultural space is completely free. We don't charge the audience to watch. We don't charge the performers to perform. The place runs on donations, and it has a self-serving or self-running canteen that still serves a meal under 150 rupees in today's days and time. So Lamakaan is one success story I'm really, really proud of. And not because of the place that we've started, or we as founding members who came up with this idea, but because of the community we've built. The community that Lamakaan has with its patrons, with the people who come there, the regulars as we call them, who are always there to enjoy, support and pay it forward. I can give you a couple of examples, like when one of the earlier days of Lamakaan, when we started and we were having this cultural program, it was a play, it was a monologue done by a very big theatre personality in Hyderabad, and he was on stage giving this monologue in this play, and suddenly the lights went off, and we don't have generators and UPS in Lamakaan, and suddenly for a moment the entire place was plunged in darkness, and a person put on the torch on his phone, and within seconds everybody else had done that, and now there was this place filled with light shining on stage, and he could move on with his performance. So that's how the community kind of comes together to do what it takes to make a place function. Then some years back, so the Lamakaan is in a residential area. Though we flout no rules, it could be a bit of a problem with people in terms of sound and all, though we shut at 10:30, but I can understand the parking problem and all. So neighbors had complained, and GHMC sent us a notice saying that Lamakaan has to be shut down. We were very happy. We were like, shut it down, then we'll do something to get the proper permissions or whatever, and start it. But within 2 hours, I am told that 4,000 people had marched to Lamakaan, to the GHMC office, asking for the notice to be revoked. That had nothing to do with us. It was just the people who used to come to Lamakaan realized that that space can't be taken away from them. So these are the kind of instances when you build a community that takes on a form larger than yourself. It is something that we didn't imagine that would happen. We thought we had to run it on a day-to-day basis. Someone the other day asked me, what would it take to open a Lamakaan in another city, like Bangalore or Hyderabad? What does one need? And I had said, jigar. Because, you have this prime property of real estate in a prime location, and you give it back to society for free. That takes a little bit of large-heartedness, right? It's not about commercial or anything. It's just about giving it back to society. And that's where I'd like to emphasize that to pay it forward, to give something back to your society, you don't need to be doing it full-time. The fact that only NGOs can make a better social living condition, or only activists should have a political voice and a political know-how about how to get things better, or businessmen should just be, making their empire larger. That's a very myopic outlook on life. I'm a filmmaker. I'll always remain one, inshallah. My other 3 founding members have flourishing and thriving careers and businesses. And it takes very little to just extend yourself just a little to be able to share your privileges and your space. And that's what Lamakaan is. People think it's Rang Sharda, or it's, what is that space in Bombay? Prithvi Theatre. And I keep saying, no, it's our living rooms. The way we grew up, we had mehfils in our house, chai would be made in the kitchen, there were samosas being served. That's exactly, it's an extension of our living room that we've given back to society. So now you've seen what a checkered career graph or life I've had. And there are a couple of things that are responsible for that. I think one of them would be that I don't say no to opportunities. When an opportunity presents itself, I will take it. I gladly take that credit. Yes, without putting too much thought or what the eventual result could be, I take that opportunity. Jo hoga dekha jayega. So I do that. A second would be that, I've had a one-point agenda in life. That is to have a good time. And that probably is the reason or the motivation that I wake up every morning and get to where other people call work every single day. And the third, and I think the most important, is that I'm not afraid, I'm not embarrassed to change my mind. However passionate I may have been of the last thing I was doing. So I was this passionate person who wanted to do law. Law was my passion. Nahi kare. I opened Elahé, passionately ran it, sold clothes with a passion, became a filmmaker. Now I'm a passionate filmmaker. So it's okay to change your mind. Just because you had thought that you'd do something at one point doesn't mean that you have to tie yourself to that. It's your mind, you change it. It's your life, you live it. That's what I've always believed in. And what I want from my life, I would like to take the help of a few lines written by one of our best poets in India, Javed Akhtar, who has said, "Meri zindagi, meri manzile, मुझे खुर्ब नहीं तो दूर दे, मुझे तू दिखा वही रास्ता जो सफ़र के बाद गुरूर दे." And the rough translation is, "My life, my destinations, don't give them close but distant be. Show me that path that after the journey fills me with pride and dignity." Thank you.